It started with an old, creaky wooden sign planted in the front yard of an aging Victorian house. "Yard sale, everything must go," scrawled in faded red paint. The house, long abandoned and rumored to be cursed, suddenly showed signs of life. No one in the neighborhood remembered the last time they had seen someone living there. It had been decades. The windows were always dusty, the porch sagging, and yet, on that Saturday morning, a variety of objects were displayed across the lawn. Antiques, children's toys, mirrors, and peculiar trinkets, all arranged neatly, as if someone had been curating them for years. Curiosity and the promise of cheap antiques lured the first few buyers. Among them was Jacob, a college student with an eye for vintage furniture, and Mrs. Hensley, an elderly woman who lived a block away. The moment they stepped onto the grass, they felt a chill not from the morning air, but something deeper, crawling up their spines. Behind an old oak table, an elderly man sat, motionless. He had deep wrinkles, sunken eyes, and a smile that never reached them. His clothes were oddly formal, outdated by at least a century. "Welcome," he croaked. "Take what you desire, but know everything comes with a price." They assumed he was just an eccentric old man trying to sell his belongings. But the unease that settled over the yard sale remained thick, like a fog rolling in before a storm. Jacob picked up a silver hand mirror, its handle carved with roses and vines. The reflection was strangely dim, as if the glass had absorbed more than just light over the years. He felt an overwhelming urge to buy it. Mrs. Hensley examined a porcelain doll with eerily lifelike blue eyes. The doll's tiny lips were slightly parted, as if it were whispering something inaudible. Her hands trembled as she cradled it, but she too couldn't resist taking it home. A middle-aged man named Derek found a wooden clock, its hands frozen at 3:15 a.m. He shook it gently. The pendulum inside creaked, moving slightly, though no wind touched it. He took it anyway, drawn to its craftsmanship. One by one, more buyers took home pieces of history unknowing of the darkness they carried away with them. That night, Jacob awoke to the sound of whispering. The mirror he had placed on his nightstand reflected his dimly lit room, except there was something else. A shadow moved, independent of him. It grew taller, looming over his bed, its fingers stretching toward him. He turned the mirror face down, but the whispers didn't stop. Mrs. Hensley woke to soft giggles. The doll, which she had left in the living room, was now sitting on her nightstand, its head slightly tilted. She could swear its lips had moved. That night, she dreamed of a little girl standing at the foot of her bed, asking, "Can I sleep next to you?" Derek's clock, once broken, now ticked steadily. At exactly 3:15 a.m., his bedroom door creaked open on its own. Heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. The air grew thick, suffocating, and he felt a presence standing just beyond his doorway, watching. As the days passed, the hauntings intensified. Objects moved on their own, shadows grew bolder, and nightmares became unbearable. Jacob returned to the old house, intending to confront the old man. But the yard was empty. No tables, no antiques, nothing. The house looked abandoned once more. He knocked, but the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the house was frozen in time-dust-covered furniture, peeling wallpaper, and a musty scent that carried the weight of years. Then, he found it. A collection of yellowed photographs, each capturing a moment from previous yard sales. In every photo, a buyer held an object, the same ones he, Mrs. Hensley, and Derek had taken home. The final photo made his blood run cold. It showed a new yard sale, but in the background, barely visible, were ghostly figures looming over the buyer's dark, hollow-eyed shapes with outstretched fingers, leeching onto their souls. Jacob ran. He called Mrs. Hensley and Derek, urging them to return the objects. But it was too late. That night, Mrs. Hensley's screams were heard by neighbors. By the time help arrived, she was gone, vanished, the only trace of her being the porcelain doll sitting in a rocking chair, its lips now curled into a sinister smile. Derek's house burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances. Firefighters claimed the fire started in his bedroom, but there was no source. The wooden clock, however, was found untouched in the ashes its hands, still frozen at 3:15 a.m. And Jacob, he tried to destroy the mirror, smashing it to pieces. But each shard reflected the same thing, a tall, dark figure grinning back at him. The whispers turned to laughter. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him wholly was his own reflection, reaching out from the glass. Days later, another wooden sign appeared in the yard. "Yard sale, everything must go." The cycle began again. A week later, a new family moved into the neighborhood. The Millers, eager to furnish their home, noticed the yard sale sign and wandered toward the house. A fresh set of objects sat neatly arranged on the long furniture: paintings, toys. At the center of it all, an antique mirror, a porcelain doll, and a wooden clock, hands still frozen at 3:15 a.m. Behind the oak table sat a new figure, younger than the last, but with the same hollow-eyed smile. "Welcome," she crooned. "Take what you desire, but everything comes with a price." The Millers, unaware of the horror before them, stepped forward, eyes gleaming with curiosity. And the darkness waited, hungry as ever. That evening, as the Millers slept, their youngest daughter, Emily, woke up to a soft whispering sound. She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. The porcelain doll was no longer on her shelf. It was on her pillow, inches from her face. Downstairs, Mr. Miller stirred at exactly 3:15 a.m. A soft ticking noise filled the air, echoing through the house. He walked toward the living room, where the clock sat on the mantel. The hands had moved. The time was now 3:16 a.m. The pendulum swung frantically, casting distorted shadows across the walls. In their bedroom, Mrs. Miller let out a muffled scream. Her reflection in the mirror did not move with her. It grinned, placing a finger to its lips in a silent warning. Then, the reflection stepped forward. Outside, the yard sale sign swayed in the night breeze. Tomorrow, new buyers would come, and the horror would continue.